All right, so we're gonna kind of dive into this concept called muted hip function.
Okay.
It's often abbreviated as MHF, and we're gonna be looking at an article today from CrossFit's founder Greg Glassman. It's called a costly biomechanical fault,
Yeah.
and I think that's a really good way to think about it because as CrossFitters, we're constantly trying to get better. We're trying to improve our performance, and often we've plateaued. We can't seem to get past, certain certain weights, certain times.
Yeah.
And so maybe this is something that's kind of holding us back.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
I think just as a teaser, I've definitely felt this before.
Oh, yeah.
Where I'm doing like a set of push presses or something, and especially as I get towards the end of the set, like my form just kind of deteriorates.
Yeah.
And I'm not as stable.
Right.
And, I'm able to kind of push through it, but it doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
And I know it's probably not the most efficient way.
Yeah. And that's a perfect example of how this can kind of sneak up on us.
Yeah.
Because even really experienced athletes can have this underlying issue. It's not always obvious.
Right.
Glassman even says that it can take 3 to 5 years for even top-level athletes to fully develop that hip explosiveness and eliminate those tendencies.
Wow. 3 to 5 years. That's...
Yeah. It's a long game.
Okay. So we're calling this a deep dive for a reason.
Absolutely.
So what is it? What exactly is muted hip function? I mean, I get, we're not using our hips the way we should be, but for like a CrossFitter,
Yeah.
What does that actually mean?
Okay, so think about your glutes and your hamstrings.
Okay.
These are your powerhouse muscles. They're the primary drivers for hip extension and so many of our movements in CrossFit. So when we talk about muted hip function, what we're saying is those muscles aren't firing properly.
Right.
And as a result, your legs end up compensating, taking over the work that your hips should be doing.
So like my quads are trying to be the stars of the show when really they should be, just supporting players.
Yeah, they're trying to steal the spotlight and it's not a good look.
Okay, it makes sense. But like, why is that a problem? I mean, so my quads are working a little harder. Is that really a big deal?
It might sound like a small thing, but that inefficiency can have a ripple effect.
Okay.
First off, you're losing power. You're not utilizing those big, strong hip muscles to their full potential.
So like less explosive lifts.
Exactly. And then there's the stability issue. When your hips aren't driving the movement, your foundation is literally less stable.
Oh, so like...
It's like trying to build a house on sand.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we're talking like missed box jumps, failed lifts, even an increased risk of injury because
All of the above.
we're not stable.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's a recipe for disaster.
So how do we know if we're falling into this trap? Like, are there any signs that we can look for during our WDs that tell us, like, hey, your hips are not pulling their weight?
Absolutely. Let's use the push press as an example.
So you're doing your push presses and you notice your knees are jutting forward as you dip down.
Oh, yeah.
Or maybe you feel your pelvis tilting back, almost like you're about to do a good morning instead of a push press.
I have seen that in the mirror.
And yeah, those are
Yeah.
classic signs.
Yeah. I never really connected it to anything. I just thought like, oh, my form's getting sloppy.
It's easy to dismiss, but those little form deviations are often the first clue.
Okay, but like what's actually happening mechanically when we do that?
Okay, so in an ideal world, your hips are initiating that downward movement,
Right.
keeping your torso upright, nice and stable.
Like a nice straight line.
Exactly. But when those glutes and hamstrings aren't fully engaged, your quads take over.
Oh.
And that's what pulls those knees forward and causes that pelvic tilt.
So instead of that powerful, smooth hip drive, we're basically defaulting to this weaker, less stable movement pattern.
Exactly. And unfortunately, our bodies are really good at finding ways to compensate.
Right. We can still get the rep.
You can still get the rep, but at what cost?
Yeah.
You're sacrificing power stability and putting yourself at risk.
Right. And we're talking any CrossFit movement, right? It's not just limited to the push press.
This impacts any movement that requires hip extension. Think about cleaning that heavy barbell or exploding off the ground for a box jump.
Wow.
Okay.
I'm convinced like MHF is definitely something we need to address.
Sure.
But you said it could take years to fix.
Yeah.
So like, where do we even begin to tackle this?
Well, the good news is CrossFit itself can be an excellent way to combat this.
Oh, wait,
The key is to be deliberate and focused in our training
Okay.
and to prioritize exercises that really demand powerful hip extension.
So like, what kind of exercises are we talking about?
Well, as you might have guessed, the push press is a great one.
Oh, interesting. So the same exercise that can reveal MHF can also be used to fix it.
Exactly. It's all about using it as a tool to identify those tendencies and then actively work to correct them.
Okay. I'm intrigued by this. Let's unpack this a little bit more when we come back after the break. So we were talking about the push press and how it can be this really valuable tool for both identifying and correcting MHF.
Yeah, like a double whammy.
So how do we use it to actually fix those bad habits, those MHF tendencies?
Right. First off, it's not just about mindlessly pumping out reps.
Right.
You have to be really mindful of your form and how those hips are engaging.
Okay, so like what should I be feeling? Like as I'm doing the push press.
As you dip down for that press, really focus on engaging those glutes and hamstrings.
Okay.
Think about driving up from your hips, not your knees.
Oh, so like almost like I'm trying to like push the floor away with my hips.
Exactly. And if you feel those knees drifting forward or that pelvis starting to tilt back, that's your cue to re-engage those hips and try again.
So it's almost like I'm using the push press to kind of check in with my body. Like, am I using my hips correctly?
Yeah, no, it's like a built-in feedback mechanism.
Okay. I like that. So having a good coach can also make a huge difference, right?
Absolutely. A coach can spot those subtle form deviations that you might not even be aware of.
Yeah, they can provide that real-time feedback like, hey, you're doing this wrong. You need to fix this.
And speaking of feedback, Glassman actually suggests filming yourself doing push presses.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, even if you don't have a coach handy, you can still analyze your own form and identify those MHF tendencies.
It's like having a coach in your pocket.
Exactly. Technology is a beautiful thing.
Okay, so we've got the push press as our go-to for MHF. What other exercises should we be incorporating into our training?
Any exercise that emphasizes hip extension is going to be beneficial.
So like what specifically?
Deadlifts, kettlebell swings, glute bridges, hip thrusts, even good mornings when performed correctly.
Okay.
And don't forget about plyometrics.
Oh yeah, plyos.
Box jumps, jump squats, all those explosive movements that really help develop that hip power.
So it's not just about strengthening those muscles. It's about training them to be explosive.
Exactly. We need both strength and speed.
It's like we're building a Ferrari engine back there.
Exactly. We want those hips to purr.
Okay, I like that analogy. So this is starting to sound like a pretty well-rounded program.
Yeah, and the beauty of it is that we're already doing many of these exercises in CrossFit.
Right.
The key is to approach them with that awareness of MHF in mind.
It's like we're leveling up our training.
Exactly. It's about being intentional with our movements.
Quality over quantity.
Always.
Okay, all of this makes sense. But I have to ask, if it can take 3 to 5 years to truly eliminate MHF, how do we stay motivated? How do we not get discouraged?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Especially in CrossFit, we're so used to seeing those results, those PRs, those improvements. How do we stay focused when it's going to take that long to really see the changes?
I think it's about shifting our perspective. Instead of focusing on that end goal, think about the small wins along the way.
Oh, so like celebrating those little improvements inform those extra pounds on the bar.
Exactly. Every step forward is a victory.
And it's a journey, right? It's not about reaching some magical finish line. It's about making progress every single day.
And those 3 to 5 years are going to pass anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
So wouldn't you rather spend that time actively working towards a stronger, more resilient, more powerful?
Absolutely. It's an investment in our future selves.
Exactly.
I love that. So we've got the exercises, we've got the mindset, we're in it for the long haul. What else can we do to set ourselves up for success on this journey to conquer MHF?
One thing that often gets overlooked is recovery.
Oh yeah, recovery is huge.
Especially in CrossFit. We're constantly pushing our limits, so we need to prioritize rest and recovery to allow those muscles to rebuild and adapt.
So what are we talking about specifically?
Adequate sleep, proper nutrition, incorporating active recovery strategies like foam rolling, stretching.
It's all those little things that we do outside of the gym that really make a difference.
Exactly. It's about taking care of our body so they can perform at their best.
Makes sense. So we've been talking a lot about the physical aspects of MHF, but what about the mental side of things?
Oh, yeah, that's a huge part of it.
It can be frustrating to work on something for months, even years, and not see those dramatic results right away.
Absolutely. And that's where having a strong support system can be so valuable.
Okay, so surrounding yourself with people who understand your goals and can encourage you along the way.
Exactly. Your coach, your training partners, even your friends and family.
And celebrating those small wins along the way, right?
Absolutely. Every little victory deserves to be acknowledged.
I love that.
Yeah.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the physical, the mental, the emotional aspects of tackling MHF. It's definitely a multifaceted challenge.
It is, but it's a challenge worth taking on.